Hi, and welcome to show number 15 of the Cafecito Travel Talks, a podcast where people share travel stories and adventures. My name is Tony Lloyd, and I'm going to be your host. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people who've been supporting us so far. To the new people, to encourage you to subscribe. Also, if you'd like to help to support this show through donations, you can find a link in the podcast notes. If you have not done so already, please take a look at our written stories on our Facebook page. And anyone who likes to write, you're welcome to submit stories. Today I have the pleasure of going back in time with one of my guests from the early days of the Cafecito. We talk about her experience of coming from a small town to the El Cafecito, where she meets a group of people from different parts of the world, who will change her outlook on life forever. So please get yourself a cup of tea or a coffee and enjoy today's show.
Hi, I'm Angie Pantoja, and I am from originally small town in northern Indiana. Everyone's parent either did some sort of farming or worked in a factory.
For the audience to know, we actually met about over 20 years ago when I first started El Cafecito in Quito, Ecuador. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. You come into the Cafecito and your experience there. Let's start off with, what were you doing before you came to Ecuador?
Attending Indiana University, I majored in Spanish and linguistics, and I studied abroad in Spain. I met this guy named Ian, who was an American. And as I was finishing college, I called him in Ecuador, and he said, "You got to come down here. It's great. It doesn't cost very much money." And I had never, ever thought of going to Ecuador. And he said, "When you come into Quito, come to El Cafecito, tell Tony, the owner, I sent you, and I'll let him know you're coming, and don't worry, he'll take care of you." He sold my car to get a little bit of money. I think I got maybe $1,500 out of it, bought a plane ticket, and that's how I got to Cafecito.
So Angie, you come from this small town. So what made you decide to go abroad?
It originally started with, we start high school in ninth grade. Spanish course, there was an American man teaching it. He mostly showed us slides from his own travel. And I think from the very first day, I was like, I didn't even know these things existed. When I was growing up, my dad's factory would shut down for 2 weeks around the 4th of July. And we would take a vacation, and it was always just going to Arkansas to visit my mom's brother. So I think that's where I thought, I have to see these things. So I kind of credit that high school teacher.
Okay. When Ian called me, he said to me, she's not like the other people who usually come to the Cafecito. She's really this small town girl that is going to be like a fish out of water.
He was right.
Myself and a few others that were there were anticipating your arrival. And then when she came, it was like, oh, there's that American girl.
Well, I know I showed up with a lot of nonsense, and I remember being teased a little bit by people because, to go into our shower, we'd take our things. And most people were backpacking through there, and I kind of brought as if I were going to some spa day or something. My robe and my loofah and my bottle of body wash. I looked ridiculous.
You didn't have the typical backpacker look. That's what made it interesting. When you first got there, what did you think of the?
No idea where I was going or what I was doing. So I think I was really, to be honest, pretty overwhelmed. I really didn't know what to expect at all. But my impressions of it were that as soon as I walked in, I just felt like everything was going to be okay, because you immediately started talking to me about lock up your traveler's check. And then, and you kind of took me up to the carrot room, and at the time there was only one other person in there. So my initial impression of it, this is a nice, calm, quiet place. That was wrong.
That was wrong. Okay, we'll get into that in a few minutes. Family and your friends back home, you tell them you're going off to Ecuador. What did they have to say about that?
Everybody was against it. South America is violent, saying you're going to get killed, you're going to get kidnapped. My dad he thought it was a dumb idea, but he's like, whatever. But my mom was actually mad, really mad. And she's from Arkansas. She grew up in cotton and fields as a child, very poor. I was actually the first person on either side of my family to go to college. She'll go to college, she'll get a professional job, which is going to be really neat, and she'll get a beautiful home and marry a guy from college and have some kids. And I think that was their idea for me after college, was I was going to be this sense of pride for them. look what we did with Angie. Instead, when I'm done, I throw in a backpack and go to Ecuador. So she's really mad at me at this point.
Okay, I hope she recovered since then.
Not completely, but it's only been 20 years, so I'm trying to give her some time.
Okay, okay. Okay, I like that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the personalities that you came across with when you got to the hostel.
So the first person I met was Andrew from Switzerland because he and I were both in the carrot room. Actually, I think he's one of the first people to kind of put me in my place. So he was studying Spanish, so I kind of did the, yeah, I already speak Spanish fluently. I studied in Spain and I'm not going to need to study Spanish. And then I realized he spoke English, French, and German already. And that was so with a lot of people I met. I realized bilingual was, hooray for you. Bilingual wasn't a big deal there. A lot of your travelers spoke several languages. So suddenly I realized I'm not as educated as I thought I was. But somewhere there, you moved me to the banana room. People in the banana room really became more of a community. It was almost like a family in there because we were the long-term people. We stayed a long time. There was the girl from New Zealand named Larissa. She was a huge personality. I just assumed she didn't like me. I was like, this girl doesn't like me. I tried to avoid her because she kind of scared me a little. But then I remember one time in a bar, we would go to this one bar. Some guy in there just kept kind of just bugging me. You know what I mean? One of those I would tell him just go away, and he wouldn't. And she went up and just shoved him in the chest, shoved him and put her finger in his face. And I was like, oh, I guess she does like me. She's going to beat this guy up for me. So, there were a group of clowns and I made the mistake of making eye contact. And so they start kind of doing the hola and trying to get my attention. And I just sort of wave at them, which is a mistake because then they start following me. And I kept telling them, stop following me, and they wouldn't, and it was scaring me a little, so I headed back to the Cafecito, and so I walked in there, and of course I think I'm help. I remember she called me Blondie, and she said something to the effect, with her finger right in my face, listen up, Blondie, you're going to have to wisen up, or you're going to get yourself really hurt, so knock it off right now and start paying attention to your surroundings. And I do think now, or even really then, aggressive talk to me wasn't in any way because she didn't like me, but she really felt like someone needed to tell me. Oh, there was this great guy. I believe he might have originally been from India, but I think he held a Canadian passport named Arush. And he was great, though. I remember he was always full of hugs. He hugged me, and it really made me feel good. And he wasn't a small person. You know what I mean? So when he hugged you, he really wrapped around you, and and I think everyone loved him. He was like a magnet. If you went down to the cafe, there were just people piled onto whatever table he sat at. But yeah, there were some fun things that happened with Arush in the banana room.
I remember that day when I was sitting at the front desk. So you came downstairs and you were all flushed, and you still hadn't had time to do your hair in a way that you would normally do it, but you were a little bit oh my gosh. And I'm like, well, what's going on? She's, well, I need to sit down. I need to have a drink or something. And I'm like, well, tell me what's going on? And she said, I was sitting in my bed. He was sitting in his. We were talking for about half an hour. And then all of a sudden, Carlos's head popped out underneath the sheets. I had no idea what was going on. The whole time I was sitting there with him calmly, this man's head just popped out of his sheets. And what was quite interesting is that there were two parts to that. One was that Carlos was the local sort of drug dealer that would deal different things for travelers. But he was also forbidden from coming into the hostel. And they'd actually slept together.
I do. And that's what's so funny to think back then of the things that would just, I don't know how to say it, throw me, I guess. I don't know why that was so upsetting to me for a moment. Now I don't know.
Then to follow that, I remember you as you took a little bit of drink. I don't remember what you were drinking, if it was coffee or even alcohol.
I also remember you're like, you need a tea.
Tea is usually my solution to everything. As you were calming down a bit, you're like, okay, this is just so different. This is just...
Yeah, because what's funny to me, growing up in the town I did, when I went to college, I thought that was wild. What I wasn't really accustomed to was, these two are sleeping together for a few nights, and then with both of them knowing it, one of them would just sleep with someone else and everybody's cool with that. And sometimes all three of them slept together. And then the one from Texas, she was with the girl from New Zealand and then plus this other guy.
Her
I can't
boyfriend.
remember. Well, her boyfriend, yes, but there was also another guy there, a blonde guy who was like a surfer. I don't know if you remember him.
Yes.
But she, the girl from Texas, was with him for a while. And that's what I wasn't used to. And now I think, I don't know why. I mean, of course, it was a time for people to explore. But for me, it was just like, what are people doing?
Then came Dr. John Murphy, MD. I'll let you start off by describing him a bit to the audience.
Okay. When I first met him, actually, I think he was very handsome. He had dark hair, dark eyes. He was had a nice build.
He told us that he wrestled for the U.S. Olympic team.
Right. He told me he had just finished medical school, that he was an MD, and he showed me checks at John Murphy, MD. And so I did ask him, I said, if you're a doctor, why aren't you staying down at the Hotel Cologne, this really nice hotel in town? And he said, oh, I just really want this experience, of a traveler because I've been in school all these years working really hard. I had trained for the Olympics and everything's just been so goal oriented and all that. I just wanted time to relax and explore. And so I'm going to do this before I go back home and start my practice, because once I start my practice, that's it. It's just going to be that kind of a life. So, and I, of course, believed the story. I didn't have any reason not to until I did have a reason not to. He started dating a local girl whose English was brilliant, if you remember her. She came from a wealthy family and she had a beautiful singing voice. She would sing in your bar for us. Sometimes we'd beg her to sing. And one day she came into the cafe very distraught. And she said, what do you know about John? And I said, well, you know more about him than I do. You're dating him. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And she was like, tell me everything you know. I'm like, I don't know anything. I mean, you know what I know. And anyway, it turned out that he had bought a cell phone with one of his checks maybe a week or so earlier, but he really wanted a different phone, but they didn't have it. And they told him, when that phone comes in, just go ahead and use this phone. When that phone comes in, we'll give you a call. You can come and exchange it. And so she went with him. But what it was they kind of set him up because he had passed a bad check to them. And it had bounced. And it's a little different than in the States there. I think it seemed like it was a pretty big deal because he was arrested.
So he was so convincing.
Yeah, well, and his check said MD on it.
So he got arrested. And I remember clearly that we were considered to be the closest people to him that could actually help him out of the situation.
Back then, it wasn't all that organized. Like, we weren't sure which jail they took him to or anything. They didn't have really good paper trails for people. And I think we were concerned, would he just sort of get lost in the jails there? No one would really know where he was.
Exactly. We went to 3 different jails before we actually found him.
We did. You and I just went from jail to jail trying to find him. And then we did. And, the jail really wasn't that nice. I remember going down some pretty steep stairs, and the jail was like down underground, and it was really wet and cold.
So the first thing he said to us when we got downstairs, he's like, hey, how are you guys doing? Thank you for coming to visit me. As if he wasn't in jail, as if he was just in a resort somewhere. Exactly. And this is where the story starts to get weird, because all of a sudden we're like, this is not a normal behavior to have.
And I was taking pictures of him, of course, because I found it all hugely interesting.
So we said, okay, well, John, you need to tell us who you are, who we should call in the States to get your help. Do you remember what he had to say to us then?
Oh my gosh, yeah, call some doctor. And we were just like, what? Call a doctor? Because I think my initial thought was maybe this was a colleague of his, because I still think he's a doctor.
So we said, okay, fine, we will go back and we will contact this doctor.
Which you did, and then it all started to fall into place.
The doctor that answered said, who is this? Who's calling? And I identified myself. I explained to him that I'm in Ecuador, and that John Murphy in a jail in Ecuador, and he's given me your number. And the doctor said, I want nothing to do with him. You need to talk to his parents. I said, well, I don't understand. He said that you are the person who is closest to him. The doctor said to me, well, young man, let me explain to you something. You're calling a mental institution. And this gentleman that you're talking about is actually a patient from this hospital who escaped, stole documents, and then forged a document that said that he is a medical doctor. He is somebody who can be very convincing, but also he needs to stay calm at all times. He should not be overly excited. Also, can have an aggressive personality. So you have to be very careful how you treat the situation. And I was like, well, I'm not a doctor. I just run a hostel. So he says, well, good luck in how you do it. You have to make sure he stays calm at all times. And I was like freaking out. And
we're in our 20s ourselves. We don't know what we're doing with this guy, right?
And I got off the phone and you said, so what? And I said, well, let me just breathe for a second before I could even try to explain it to you.
We probably had a tea. So I called his father, and I think a little bit of backup. At this point, Tony, we had learned a lot because Ecuadorian girlfriend's father had a lot of connections, and they kind of checked him out, and we found out he had gotten himself into a lot of trouble throughout Ecuador already before he showed up at the hostel in Quito. So he actually had Interpol looking for him over some drug charges.
Exactly, because he had basically with an American volunteer from the Peace Corps. So they went out and they bought some drugs. And in Ecuador, there's a zero tolerance law on drugs.
Huge, huge jail terms for even first offense.
He had managed to escape, but the other guy who was in the Peace Corps had actually gotten arrested.
We find out all this information about him. So I call his dad and explain all this to his dad. He's in big trouble. He's been involved with these drugs. And his dad didn't know. He's like, how do I know that you're not trying to scam me? Because what had happened also, back up, his Ecuadorian girlfriend's father had worked out how to get John out of there. There was going to be a little bit of a bribe to move into this location, and then we had to pay a fee. And all of this knowing that Interpol's on his heels. And we thought we just need to get him back to the States, let him get his comeuppance there, not in Ecuador. So we got it all out that he would get a direct flight out of Quito straight into, was it Miami, I believe?
It was Miami.
His father there, and Interpol would meet him there because we thought it'd be better for him to get in trouble with all these charges in the States rather than in Ecuador.
And a doctor.
And a doctor, that's right, yes. A doctor, his father, and Interpol were to meet him. But anyway, I got ahead of myself. I called his dad to get this money because you and I didn't have any money. Well, we had just enough, remember we would go get him food because he kept telling us they only fed him once a day in the jail. And also that they wouldn't give him a blanket. So we took him blankets and we took him food every day. So anyway, I called his dad, and his dad, said, I don't know if this is a scam. I don't know who you are. I haven't heard from John in a long time. And so I said, here, you can check me out, because this is before the internet. You couldn't just go look at someone's Facebook profile or Google them. And so I gave him my parents' phone number. And I have an older sister. I have a sister who's 13 years older than me. She was married at the time. So he called my parents, he called my sister, and apparently my sister had told him, because I hadn't talked to them, my parents or my sister, about any of this. And my sister just said, if she says this is what's going on, I assure you that's what's going on. And he said, well, I also don't know you. And she said, well, now you have my number and this is my address. I will guarantee the money. She's not stealing your money. So they convinced him, I guess, that I, am on the up and up, and he agreed to wire the money then.
And your parents?
Oh gosh, my mom called, and this is how we used to do it back then. We didn't all have our own phone and, laptops. So my mom called the Cafecito, and, that one phone on the wall, and someone said, Angie, your mom is on the line. So I came and said, hello. And the first words out of her mouth was, what the hell are you doing down there? And I'm just like, I didn't even understand the question. I'm like, so many things. What? And she's like, I got a call from this man. And she's like, what are you getting involved in? Just stay out of it. Don't get involved. She was already mad at me for coming down. And then she gets a phone call that I'm getting involved in something that she thought sounded really seedy. And she just wanted me to come home and get a job and buy a house and get married and have some kids.
Okay. So we finally got him to transfer some money. We literally had 24 to 48 hours to get John out of the jail to the airport so that we could fly him back to the US.
Right.
And so we got the money. We went to the police station. We had agreed that afternoon that the next morning the flight was going to be at, I think it was an 8 o'clock flight in the morning.
It was
Yeah.
really early. I remember you and I got up in the dark.
Normally have to be at the airport 2 to 3 hours ahead of time. But what we had to do, we had to go to the jail first to go and get him and
Right?
then get him to the airport.
Oh gosh, that was another story right there, just trying to find him at the jail.
And when we got to the jail, the police officers told us, oh no, John's left.
Yes. And here we are again looking at each other like, what?
What do you mean he left? And because he was such a good convincing person, he had convinced them, oh yeah, yes, I'm going home today. And they actually decided to drive him to the airport. And then so we said, well, could you take us to the airport? And they're like, no, you have to take a taxi. So we then jumped in a taxi. And do you remember what happened then?
When we got to the airport?
Yes.
Yes. John Murphy had convinced them that this was all a huge mistake and he was leaving the country because, he was just accused, he didn't do anything and he's a doctor. And they had him stamping other people's like visas or passports or something. They put him to work waiting on his flight. Remember that?
Yes, so he was waiting with the police officers that were in the immigration section. And because he was just such a nice guy, they didn't have him locked up or anything. He was sitting on the counter with one of the immigration guys, and as people were leaving, saying, "Oh, bye, hope you enjoyed your time in Ecuador," and was helping to stamp his passport.
This mental patient is stamping people's passports. Excuse me, what are you doing? I remember you were talking to the officials saying, what are you doing?
It was not planned. You don't know how to say these things or how to deal in these situations. But I remember being, this is ridiculous. You cannot have him stamp in people's passport. Do you understand why he's leaving the country? We didn't go into all the full details, but I said he's somebody who is being flown back to the US to go to a mental institution.
Right, because you didn't want to tell them he's also being sought by Interpol and has drug charges pending because they might hold him. We just were trying to get him out of the country and convince them to keep a better eye on him and to put him someplace more secure.
Exactly. Okay, so then immigration officer said to me, okay, well, it's your responsibility from here on. And so they sent us both into the waiting room with him. And as we're sitting there in the waiting room, do you remember our conversation with John?
What I remember more is him really being mean to us about getting a hold of his dad. And this is also after you had learned from that doctor not to upset him. So I was getting a little nervous because he was getting very worked up that we had called his dad.
And after he calmed down about that, he kept saying, when I come back next week to Ecuador, because I'm only going to go just for the week and I'll come back down. When I come back down, I'll pay my bill that I have at the Cafecito and I will bring you a really good gift and everything and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, he was really delusional. He thought he was just I don't even know why he thought he was going back to the States at that point. I think he just thought he was going to go up there and straighten everything out and come right back.
Okay, so the representative from the airline was then informed, and this woman, she said, okay, fine. So then what we'll do is we'll have you accompany us all the way to the plane.
So it's not like you're just walking through the tunnel like we do most of the time in the States. You walk outside and climb upstairs straight into the plane. So they wanted him accompanied that whole way.
Exactly. He got on the plane. They closed the door. I was literally standing at the bottom of the steps, pulled away the steps. So now the plane is closed and it's about to take off. The representative of the airline looked at me and she goes, "It's going to be okay. Tell me that it's going to be okay."
Right. Because here this plane is going to be in the air with this mental person on it. And of course, she's concerned about everyone's safety up there now. It's going to go all the way to Miami.
And it was something like out of a movie. It literally, as we were walking away in the plane going towards the runway, I just said to her, "Yes, he'll be fine. He's just a charming character. He'll talk to people. Maybe the pilots will have him help fly the plane." And she looked at me with a strange look, and I said, "It'll be all fine."
That would be something. If anybody could convince the pilot that he too is a pilot, it would be John Murphy, MD.
It was still early in the morning. We decided to just go back to the hostel, sat down at a picnic table, and we thought, well, let's have ourselves some breakfast. And we were so exhausted. We were so glad that this was all over. As soon as our breakfast came onto the table, what happened next?
You tell it. You tell it so much better.
Okay, as soon as our breakfast came onto the table, and I still sort of remember sort of taking the fork, just about to take my first bite. And this really, again, was a scene out of a movie. Four men showed up in our front lawn and said, "Excuse me, we're here for John Murphy." And I said, "Excuse me?" And they said, "Yes, we're from Interpol and we're looking for John Murphy." And
We literally got him off on the plane like within an hour of when they would have gotten him.
as we were sitting there was an airplane in the sky, and I pointed up to the airplane and I said to them, "Well, I think he's on that flight on his way to Miami." And they said, "What?" They stood there almost frozen. And then
Looking up at that airplane, which was a funny sight to see you pointing and them just looking up at that flight.
That's it. There's nothing more to tell you. And they just stared at it for a bit, and then they walked away with disillusioned.
And Tony, I've actually tried to look him up through the years here and there, since Facebook is a thing. But John Murphy is obviously a common name because I often wonder, what would have ever happened to him after that. I've never heard from him again or been able to find him. How about you?
No, not at all. He still owes, because the money they sent was just to get him out the country. The last few weeks that he stayed with us, we gave him food, we gave him lodging, and so he still has quite a big bill. His father had said that he was going to pay the bill, and no one ever paid the bill. So John Murphy, MD, if you're listening to us,
you owe Tony a few $100s.
So tell me, was there actually a time where you thought, okay, I just need to get away from all these crazy foreigners. This is not for me. I need to go back home.
I honestly never ever did. No matter what happened, and there are more stories we can talk about another time. Wonderful things that happened, scary things that happened, bad situations I got myself into, but it never once, even today, have I regretted those because they were such neat learning experiences.
Any particular moment? This is my aha, wow moment.
I really don't know if there was one because I feel like my entire experience in Ecuador was one wow moment after another.
Now that we're coming to the end of the show, I just have two questions for you. What are you doing now?
Right now, I teach English and Spanish. I have moved around a lot at different parts of the country, just, still kind of exploring, but I've mostly stayed in the country.
You've also set up a Facebook page, right, for travelers. So tell us about that.
I have a Facebook group, and what it is I wanted to set it up for people to talk about first where they live and second places they are traveling to or have traveled to so that people could get ideas on where to go. So it is really nice and people take wonderful photos and share. One thing I really like about the group is it has attracted really nice people. So if anyone's interested in joining, just look us up under Facebook groups under Steadfast Vagabonds.
So my very last question is, what do you see as something that you have learned from that experience, from that time back 20 years ago, back here in Ecuador, that you've learned from and that maybe you'd like to share with others?
One thing I've really learned is that we all are really seeking the same things. We just go about it differently. I think that was one thing that made Cafecito so special was we had all of these different people and personalities and ways that they approach life, but we were all very much looking for connections and a place to fit in. So it was really neat to just find that you can have a family and these connections with people from all these different backgrounds and that people accepted one another. And that, I think I just learned that everybody in the world is really looking for the same thing.
Well, Angie, thanks a lot for having this chat with me today.
I loved it. Thank you so much. That was a fun stroll down memory lane.
Thank you for listening in. If you're interested in getting a hold of Angie or joining her Facebook group, the information could be found on our podcast notes, along with information about how to donate to help support our show. For the people who have not subscribed as of yet, I encourage you to do so that you get all the future updates. Take a look at our Facebook page for the written stories, and please, if you like to write, we look forward to hearing one of your stories. Any questions or comments that you have about the show, please send an email to elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. Also, I'd like to thank Marshall for all his work on the editing of these podcasts. For now, please stay safe, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to meet up sometime soon in the Cafecito in Cuenca or in Quito. All the best until the next show.